Welcome back to another episode of Dugout Talk. Today is Wednesday, March 17th, and more importantly than that, today is St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all you guys out there. I literally have, I think, maybe one like a dark green type of shirt, like a forest green almost, and just couldn't find it. So I'm rolling with no green today. It doesn't look like you've got any green on yourself either.
I think I've only got one green shirt as well.
Yeah, I don't rock green very often.
Nah, I
But
don't either.
today is another episode of One Hit Wonders. We're going to be taking a look at how the 2015 New York Mets did what they did. It was a team that was mired in mediocrity the previous half decade. So we'll get to that. But first, we're going to start out with a little history talk. So today in 1946, this would be 75 years ago now, in Daytona Beach down there in Florida. It was the one city that allows Jackie Robinson to play. At the time, he was with the Montreal Royals. He made his preseason debut at City Island Ballpark, which, looking at it, I want to live there. That's one of the coolest baseball field like complex areas I've ever seen. In the first year, in the first ever integrated spring training game, the former Negro League standout goes 0 for 3 against the Dodgers, but is encouraged by the crowd's reception. And I think it was 1986 or 1989, they eventually renamed it to Jackie Robinson Field. And so it sits there on some sort of, island. I want to assume it's almost man-made because as you can see in the years since that painting there, they've, it's expanded. So
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's some sort of man-made island down there, but it looks awesome.
yeah, it does. I forgot that Jackie Robinson was originally with Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that was yep.
So my day in history happened in 1990. It was 31 years ago, not 58 years ago.
Whoops, that's my bad.
It's all good. The first game in the history of the Chinese Professional Baseball League is played. The President Lions top the Brother Elephants 4-3. Fu Ming Tai gets the win, and Young Tai Sung the first hit. Enrique Burgess notches the first save. Enrique Burgess was actually an MLB product there for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But see, the Chinese Professional Baseball League still goes on today. It's not nearly as popular
Mm-hmm.
as like the Nippon League or the KBO, but they still get their fair share of fans. I know last year, or maybe it was the Taiwan League, I'm thinking of that. The Chinese league was kind of the first league to implement like the cardboard fans, I guess,
Mm.
because of the COVID shutdown and whatnot. But yeah, I thought this is kind of a cool little thing to see. I'm not sure how big the league is today now, but yeah, 31 years ago.
Yeah. From what I was seeing, it looks like it looks like all the teams are located on Taiwan. It doesn't look like any of the CPBL teams are actually located on mainland China.
Okay.
I think it would be crazy cool if they did. I know that not necessarily on fantastic terms politically with China.
Hmm.
So the opportunity for major league play and back and forth might be a little sketchy, but I think it'd be great to see a professional baseball league across all of mainland China. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, that would be really cool to see that.
Yeah. All right. So, as previously mentioned, today is our one hit wonder edition of the 2015 New York Mets. The story of the 2015 Mets began with one of the best pitching staffs and list of nicknames in recent baseball memory. From Thor and Dugout to Dark Knight and Big Sexy, the Mets were primed and ready to put their 6-year losing streak behind them thanks to some young guns and savvy veterans. Obviously, the question remains, how'd they do it? Jacob Degrom, Noah Syndergaard made his debut that season. Bartolo Colon proved that that was kind of his coming out season
Hmm.
in terms of his big sexy mentality. So taking a look at some of the notable moments for the Mets from 2015. On April 9th, this is after the first opening series of the season in Washington. Their former closer, current setup man, Henry Mejia, was suspended 80 games for use of stanza law. I believe this was his first suspension He would end up getting suspended 2 more times that would cost him his baseball career. He was reinstated a couple years ago and has been playing in some minor league capacities since then. But this was kind of the beginning of the end for Mejia. He was a pretty decent relief pitcher before then. So that was an unfortunate event. 23rd, the Mets beat the Braves 6-3 to complete a perfect 10-game homestand, tying their best start to a season since 1986 with a 13-3 record, and they tied the team record with an 11-game winning streak. So definitely some good starts to the season for the Mets that year. April 14th, I should have had that one switched there. During the eighth game of the season, my apologies. David Wright pulled his hamstring while stealing a base. He left the game, and Anthony Recker was brought in to play third. And after a number of weeks, Wright was diagnosed with spinal stenosis, raising questions as to whether the captain would ever return. He barely ever played again after that, and eventually called it quits. On May 12th, Noah Syndergaard made his major league debut, pitching 5 1/3 innings and allowing 3 runs in a 6-1 loss at Wrigley Field to the Cubs. Then on July 29th, the Mets were involved in a bizarre series of events where it was reported that from various social media outlets that Wilmer Flores had been traded along with Zach Wheeler to the Milwaukee Brewers in exchange for Carlos Gomez. As part of the Mets' desire to bring in an outfield bat, words spread quickly around the stadium, eventually leading to Flores, who took the field in the 8th inning, crying and visibly emotional. That was a crazy night for him, to say the least. And then on July 31st, so 2 days later, the Mets did go out and get that outfield bat, acquiring Yoenis Cespedes from the Detroit Tigers in exchange for minor leaguers Luis Sessa and Michael Fulmer. Then on September 26th, the Mets clinched the National League East after defeating Cincinnati in a 10-2 game. So we'll look at their standings later on, but they were battling pretty hard with the Nationals, trying to get over top of them pretty much throughout the season.
Right.
The Nationals were just slightly better than them almost the whole way through.
Yeah. I mean, kind of looking at this 2015 Mets team, I actually remember at the beginning of the year, I predicted this team to win the division. It was kind of like my sleeper pick, I guess. And I think this even goes back to 2014, because in 2014 they finished with like a 79-83 record or something like that. And if I remember correctly, September was a big month for them. So, and this was around the time that Jacob Degrom had just come up. I believe he had broken into the major leagues the year before. So they were starting to get some of their future pieces on the team as far as pitchers go, because they also had Noah Syndergaard, who was getting ready, and even Steven Matz was starting to make his way up to the team. But this team wasn't like this team had an incredible farm system or anything like that. There wasn't really a whole lot that stood out about this team that made you think that they were going to be division champs or even a World Series contender. It was just more, it kind of felt like all the cards got laid out and everything that got played just worked in the Mets' favor, which is kind of why it feels like this World Series run they went on was a little bizarre, because there were better teams in the league, including the Nationals. The Nationals in their own division should have been a better team, and they just fell apart. They weren't really the NL East at this point wasn't very competitive. The Marlins were kind of hit and miss. The Phillies weren't all that great. The Braves were entering a complete rebuild at this point. So the fact that the Mets were able to pull this off was very surprising in its own right. But looking at just how their season went down, everything just went right for them. They got great production out of Degrom. They got a solid rookie year out of Syndergaard. Matt Harvey came back from Tommy John surgery and pitched very well in that brief time he was with the team. And then they just got consistent production out of their offense too. Even Michael Conforto, when he came up, when he got called up to the team, he he performed exceptionally well. And they battled through a lot of injuries too, especially in the middle of the season. They didn't have David Wright, they didn't have Daniel Murphy, they didn't have Travis d'Arnaud. They were without a pretty good handful of their guys at some points throughout the middle of the season, and yet they still found a way to get the job done, it seemed like.
Yeah, very resilient through and through. They never really, you look at their top guys, David Wright, Curtis Granderson, they were both, entering the twilight of their career. Their pitching staff was young. Their bullpen was up and down, wasn't fantastic, but it all kind of came together for them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So looking at the Mets lineup and how their lineup looked, this was their game one of the World Series lineup. I know they had different pieces all throughout the season. So rather than try to list certain guys here, I just went with their A team lineup. Curtis Granderson was leading off for them, playing in right field. David Wright was their third baseman. Looking at Granderson's stats real quick, he did play a full season, which was really good for him. Scoring 98 runs, hitting 26 home runs, driving in 70, and hitting 259. Respectable season for him. David Wright, as we mentioned, he had the major injury. He only appeared in 38 games for the Mets that year, scoring 24 runs, hitting 5 home runs, driving in 17, hitting 289. Daniel Murphy was playing second base for them. We're going to talk about him a lot come the postseason. He appeared in 130 games for the Mets, scoring 56 runs, hitting 14 home runs, driving in 73, and hitting 281. So a good season for him. Yoenis Cespedes, after they got him at the end of July, he played 57 games for them, scoring 39 runs, hitting 17 home runs, driving in 44, and hitting 287. He was definitely the big spark plug they needed there to get over the Nationals hump. Looking at Lucas Duda, their first baseman, he played 35 games, scored 57 runs, hit 27 dingers, drove in 73, and hit 244. Looking at Travis d'Arnaud, he played in 67 games, scored 31 runs, hit 12 home runs, drove in 41, and hit 268. My apologies, I kind of cut out there. To round it out, we do have Michael Conforto, who was their left fielder there at the end of the season. He appeared in 56 games, scored 30 runs, hit 9 home runs, drove in 26, and hit 270. Then we had Wilmer Flores rounding it out, a shortstop playing 137 games, scoring 55 runs, driving in 16 home runs, 59 runs batted in, and a 263 average.
I mean, a decent lineup. It's a consistent lineup at best, but again, there wasn't really a whole lot of guys here that just stood out, kind of like what we talked about with the Cardinals last week in 2011. These are just kind of a group of guys that really put production together. I mean, Yoenis Cespedes was a huge addition for them. I didn't really talk about that on the last slide, but that was a major addition for them at the time. Because if you remember, in 2014, the Red Sox acquired him kind of for the same reasons that the Mets acquired him. They got him from the A's, and it didn't work out in Boston very well, but now he got a chance here in New York, and it just seemed like he turned on a new. It seemed like he turned on a new part of his game, a game that hadn't really been seen consistently. When he got to the Mets, it just seemed like he fit right in immediately. He was the driving force of this offense for the second half of the year. And like you said, his production in those 57 games was really what helped carry the Mets over the Nationals at the end there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very valuable. He was kind of he was a decent power hitter, didn't hit for a tremendous average in Oakland, Boston, and Detroit. So everything kind of came together for him there in his Mets debut. Looking at the rotation and how it played out, as I mentioned, it was one of the better rotations in recent history. Looking at Bartolo Colon, he was kind of their big ace. at least for that season. He went 14-13 across 31 starts. He had a 4.16 ERA, 194.2 innings, 90 earned runs, 25 home runs, 24 walks, 136 Ks. Just a nice innings eater. He got the job done. It wasn't crazy good, but for him being like 40 at the time, that was pretty outstanding for him. Jacob Degrom, as we mentioned earlier, this was basically his coming out party. He went 14-8 with a 2.54 ERA across 30 starts, 1 flat innings, 54 earned runs, 16 home runs, only 38 walks, and 205 Ks. This was really the start of Degrom's super success he's had since then. Matt Harvey, this was kind of the end, towards the end at least, of his super success that he had. He went 13-8 that year with a 2.71 ERA across 29 starts. He pitched in 189 innings, allowing 57 earned runs and 18 home runs, walking 37 and striking at 188. Jonathan Neese, whichever you prefer. He went 9-10 with a 4.13 ERA across 29 starts. He pitched 176 innings, allowed 81 earned runs, 20 home runs, walked 55 and struck out 113. A nice number 4/number 5 type of piece there. And then Noah Syndergaard obviously made his debut in May. As we covered, he went 9-7 across 24 starts. He pitched to a 3.24 ERA, allowed 54 earned runs, 19 home runs, 31 walks, and 166 strikeouts across those 150 innings. So, I mean, overall, three of their 5 starting pitchers had ERAs under 4. 2 of their 5 had ERAs under 3. That's always a recipe for success.
Absolutely. I mean, this rotation, they were young, but they had that good mix of a guy like Bartolo Colon, a very easygoing starting pitcher who could lead that staff. While guys like Degrom and Syndergaard and even Harvey were kind of developing. Harvey was coming back from Tommy John surgery, so considering the year that he put up, that was a really big step for him as far as his Tommy John recovery went. But this rotation was clearly their best part of their whole roster. And I honestly forgot how good this rotation was for most of the year. For Degrom, it was his first full season in the big leagues, if I remember correctly. So teams were getting a solid look at him. Noah Syndergaard made his major league debut, so teams were getting a solid look at him as well. And even John Neese, he's just kind of putting some scrappy starts out there. He was as consistent as could be. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. So when you have 5 capable guys in your rotation who can consistently go out there and throw 6 innings, give up a few runs, not even really walk anybody. I mean, the walk numbers here are absurd across the amount of innings that these guys recorded. Cologne only walked 24 in almost 200 innings of work. Degrom only walked 38 in a little over 190 innings. Harvey 37, Syndergaard 31 for a rookie is absolutely incredible.
Exactly.
It's crazy. This rotation really was kind of flew under the radar most of the year, and people didn't realize how good they were until they got to the big stage of October.
Yeah.
And pitching is so important.
And looking at looking at their bullpen, you can see just why. The guy that had the most walks for them out of their bullpen was Alex Torres, and he had 26. That was the most across their full season. Looking at their Mets bullpen in general, Urias Familia, he was their closer. He's probably the most tenured Met on that team now. But at the time, he was still a younger guy. 78 innings for him that season. He recorded 43 saves, 1.85 ERA, 19 walks, and 86 strikeouts. Carlos Torres, he was pretty much their setup man. He pitched 57.2 innings. He finished 19 games. He had a 4.68 ERA and 18 walks to 48 strikeouts. Sean Gilmartin, he had 57.1 innings logged. He finished 13 games, pitched to a 2.67 ERA, walked 18 and struck out 54. Hanzo Robles, He pitched 54 innings flat. He finished 7 games himself, pitched to a 3.67 ERA, walked 18 and struck out 61. Alex Torres, as I just mentioned, he pitched in 34.1 innings. He finished 11 games, pitched to a 3.15 ERA, walked 26 and struck out 35. Addison Reed, who they kind of acquired in a small deal in late July. He ended up logging 15 and a third innings for them. He finished 3 games, recorded a 1.17 ERA, walked 5 and struck out 17. Logan Verrett, he logged 38.2 innings. He actually started 4 games. So he was kind of borderline back and forth long innings slash emergency starter. He had a 3.03 ERA. He only walked 11 and he struck out 36. Steven Matz, as we mentioned, made his debut that season. He started all 6 of the games that he appeared in, logged 35.2 innings, and pitched to a 2.27 ERA and 10 walks and 34 strikeouts. Eric Goodell, he logged 33.1 innings. He finished 9 games, pitched to a 2.43 ERA, walked only 9 guys through 33 innings and struck out 34. And then Tyler Clippard, the veteran who's bounced around quite a bit in his career, he logged 32.1 innings, finished 6 games, logged a 3.06 ERA, walked 10 and struck out 26. So looking at the bullpen in general, a lot of really, really good ERAs. Up and down it. The walks are still down. The strikeouts are pretty much 1 inning for everybody. And they had guys who could log starts and Matz and Verrett. So I think overall this was a pretty lethal bullpen, but it was a really under the radar bullpen. Not a lot of these guys were, big name players.
No, not really. I mean, Jerry's Familia was really the biggest name guy. Addison Reed had been around for a bit, but this was a relatively young group of guys as well. And the bullpen really came through for this team in a lot of ways as well, especially down in the stretch. You have a guy like Familia in the back end of that bullpen who can just be lights out in that closer's role. Hanzo Robles, I believe he was kind of coming into his own at this point. He'd maybe only been in the league for like a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same could be said for Goodell and Gil Martin. They weren't around very long either. So they had a good mix of young pitchers. They had a good mix of veterans. Addison Reed, when he came over from the Diamondbacks, just absolutely lit it up. Yeah, it was almost like he needed that change of scenery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just a scrappy, good bullpen. No way on paper that kind of like jumps out at you, but these guys performed like they needed. And like I said, pitching wins you games. Pitching is so important, especially later in the stretch. And the Mets, they had a consistent offense, but the offense was still kind of a weak point for them. But they didn't necessarily need a strong offense when they had a starting group of 5 starters who could go 6 innings, and then bullpen guys who could easily just fill in wherever they needed to fill in, and just get the job done. And again, the walks to strikeout ratio here is just absolutely incredible. Like you said, Alex Torres led the way with 26 walks among this group. And then Familia led the way in strikeouts by a long shot with 86. But yeah, it's just a good group of guys. They just came out and performed when they needed to, and they got the job done, and helped kind of carry the bullpen and rotation, kind of helped carry this team into October, it seems like.
Yeah, it absolutely did. Like mentioned, everyone had a really good season overall. Taking a look at our month-by-month standings here, how the Mets stacked up against their NL East opponents. At the end of April, so these stats, obviously, these standings are for the last day of each month. So at the end of April, New York sat in first place with a 15-8 record, and you can see the rest of you could kind of start to see that the NL East may be competitive at the end of the first month there. Going into June, however, you could definitely see that there was a disparity starting to form. Washington had took over first place. The Mets fell just a half game back. Atlanta was kind of holding firm at 500. and Miami and Philadelphia were not competitive teams. Looking at the standings at the end of June, it was more of the same. Washington continued to kind of run that division with the Mets right behind them. Atlanta started to fall off a little bit, and then obviously Miami and Philadelphia continued. This will be a storyline throughout the rest of these months. They were both bad. Going into August, by this point, the Mets had just made a couple moves that would get them to the World Series, but they sat 2 games. I'm sorry, you lost me again there. As I was saying, the Mets sat just 2 games behind Washington entering August, so they were definitely in a firm place to compete. And then those moves obviously ended up making a big difference for them. As you can see, once they entered September, the Mets had a pretty firm lead. Washington had kind of fallen off in the month of August, and then through September and the couple games they played in October, the Mets pretty much just shored up their division. Overall, it was a good second half of the season. The Mets made good, smart moves that netted them some really important wins there in August and September, and eventually netted them a lot of wins in October as well.
Yeah, it was kind of like what I said earlier. The NL East just turned out to not be a very competitive division either. I think this really helped in the Mets' favor. The first month of the season is always kind of everyone seems to be in it somehow in the first month. But as the season starts to go along, you start to see who's really going to be kind of in the mix. The Mets really held their own all year long. It was kind of like what I said though. In the middle months, they really ran into a lot of injuries. There was at one point they were without Wright, d'Arnaud, and Murphy in that lineup. When you got Eric Campbell being your primary third baseman, you're starting to run into some trouble. But they held their own, and like I said, it was really the pitching that helped them stay afloat. Because if that pitching staff didn't hold together, if the pitching staff and bullpen didn't hold together, they probably don't go out and get Yoenis Cespedes, and more likely the Carlos Gomez deal is what takes off. So I think it's just it's interesting to see how this team carried themselves all through the year. But they caught fire at the right time too. When August came around, it just felt like a completely different team. It was like the addition of Yoenis Cespedes really put this team over the hump, and the Nationals were really starting to just tank. It seemed like Washington was trying to make moves themselves, and those moves weren't working out. But the Mets were able to do kind of the same thing, and it worked out for them. And really, sometimes that's just how baseball goes. Sometimes you make moves and on paper they look great, but then when it actually comes to production, nothing comes through. I think that was the case more for Washington. They got Jonathan Papelbon, and that was a disaster to say the least. And I think it ended up really hurting them as the season went on. But I think being in a non-competitive division like the NL East too, I think it did help the Mets to a degree. It's just more so the World Series run, the playoff run was really when that spark got lit. It seemed like the division series and the championship series, they were just lights out. It seemed like they became unbeatable at one point during the playoff run.
Yeah, and that all started with kind of their offense. Their offense had kind of started to, not necessarily their offense, but their home runs really started to pile up, especially against the Dodgers, and as we'll see with the Cubs. Looking at the 2015 NLDS, they faced the Los Angeles Dodgers in that one. The Dodgers, I think everyone was the favorite who went against the Mets. The Mets were definitely not really expected to be a serious contender, but the Mets ended up winning the series 3-2 over the Dodgers in 5 games. One, we had a Degrom Kershaw matchup, and Degrom came out on top. It was a nice, tightly contested matchup. Maurice Familia knocked down the save. As we will see, the first of very, very many October home runs from Daniel Murphy. Game 2 played in Los Angeles. The Dodgers took that one 5-2 on the back of Zach Greinke. Noah Syndergaard took his first loss of October. Kenley Jansen locked down the save, and the Mets had home runs from Yoenis Cespedes and Michael Conforto. In Game 3, we had a high-scoring affair between the two teams. The Mets came out on top on that one, 12-7. Harvey locking down the win, and Brett Anderson taking the loss. The Dodgers had home runs from Gonzalez and Kendrick, and the Mets had home runs from Darno and Cespedes. In Game 4, the Dodgers tied the series once again at 3-1. 3-1 win there, but on the back of Clayton Kershaw, with Steven Matz taking the loss in that one. Jansen locked down his second save. Daniel Murphy hit his second home run. In Game 5, it was the Mets in a 3-2 win. Very close, very tightly contested. Very memorable matchup in that one between Degrom and Greinke. Familia took the save, his second of the postseason, and Daniel Murphy hit his third home run of October, and was second of was it like six straight postseason games he homered in. This series was known mostly for the Ruben Tejada, Chase Utley incident at second base that we went into pretty deep detail. So that's the NLDS for the Mets. I think kind of proved to themselves that this was definitely a team they had that had a real chance to put something on the board.
Absolutely. They had an opening statement with winning over Clayton Kershaw in Game 1. Now, I know kind of at this time, Kershaw was not a phenomenal postseason pitcher. He would occasionally put some good outings out there, but it always seemed like, as far as getting over that hump, he just couldn't get the job done somehow. Although you could probably argue this was the best game up to this point that he pitched in the postseason, and Degrom was just flat out better.
Yeah.
And then game two, there was that unfortunate incident with Tejada and Utley. Granted, I don't think that was a turning point so much in that game because the Dodgers would have tied the game no matter what happened there. So it probably didn't shake things up all that much, although it did allow Wilmer Flores to get more playing time as the everyday shortstop. And Game 3 was really the only offensive outburst game. I think at one point the Mets had a 10-3 lead in that game. And so the bullpen for the Mets was a little shaky there, but that was like the only time it seemed like all year they were, or that for at least those 2 months during that 2-month run getting to the playoffs. That was really their only hiccup, but thankfully for them, the offense was there that night. Game 3 at home behind the back of Matt Harvey. So, I mean, that was really the only kind of hiccup, if anything, there was. Otherwise, this was really a pitching dominant. This was a pitching dominant series. Everybody seemed to perform to their best potential. They were very hard fought games. Game 5 was one of the best in division series history. And the Mets really did shock the Dodgers. And he kind of shocked the baseball world with this win because on paper, the Dodgers should have won this series. There was no reason for them not to win this series. It's kind of like getting hot at the right moment. The Mets just got hot and they rode their pitching staff through this whole series. Because the offense, even though the offense broke out in Game 3, you can see they had 3 runs, 2 runs, 3 runs, and 3 runs. So 12 was kind of an outlier for them going in, or for this series. So the offense wasn't even really quite there. It was mostly the pitching that helped carry them. And they really came through in Game 5. And that was a crucial moment for this team. It kind of felt like that was the nail in the coffin to get them to the World Series in a way.
Yeah. Like I said, this was definitely a moment where they realized they were much better than the media outlets were saying. Looking at the NLCS that season, they faced the Chicago Cubs and made absolutely quick work of them. Once again, it was pretty much pitching dominant. You can see the score totals for these games. 3 runs was, the series high. So the Mets definitely, if they found their groove in the NLDS, they hit their stride in the NLCS. Look at game one. Game one was a 4-2 win for the Mets at home over the Cubs. Matt Harvey locked down the win in that one over John Lester. Familia got his 3rd save of the postseason to this point. Schwarber hit a home run for the Cubs, and Murphy and d'Arnaud each hit bombs for the Mets. This would be Murphy's 3rd straight game that he hit a home run in, and his 4th overall. In game 2, it was a 4-1 win for the Mets at home. On the back of Noah Syndergaard's phenomenal start. Jake Arrieta was strong as well. Familia locked down his 4th save now of the postseason, and Murphy homered in his 5th straight game, or fourth straight game, 5th overall. Game 3, the Mets went on the road to Wrigley, beat the Cubs there 5-2. That was a Degrom masterpiece. Trevor Cahill took the loss in that one for the Cubbies. Familia locked down his 5th save and his 4th straight save in a row. Murphy hit his 5th home run in a row, and his 6th in the postseason. Schwarber and Soler each went yard for the Cubbies in game 3. In game 4 was an 8-3 Mets win, sweep of the series. Bartolo Colon took his first win of October there. Hamill took his loss of the series. And then Duda, d'Arnaud, and Murphy straight game, his 7th overall. He homered as well. And then Chris Bryant hit the only Cubs home run of that game. That was a lot. I think that was the wake up call for a lot of people. Without knowing at that time who was going to be who was going to win the ALCS, between the Royals, and I forget who they was.
Blue
That
Jays.
Was that Blue? I was like, that was Blue Jays. It was
Yep.
the next year that Houston was in. The, not knowing who they were going to face, I think the Mets may have almost been the favorite at that point. They were the hottest team in baseball, and it was looking more and more like they were, going to be the favorites entering the World Series instead of the underdogs. But what happened next was kind of unforeseen.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Murphy just went on an absolute tear. It's something that a lot of people don't talk about now. I mean, it was talked about a lot back in 2015, but it's not so much talked about now. And I think it's just people forget that some guy like Daniel Murphy, who was not a home run hitter, at least he was more of a home run threat than he was a power hitter up to this point. He had 14 homers in the regular season. He had 7 in the postseason. I mean, he just came out of nowhere. 6 straight games, he hit a home run in the postseason. Up to this point, he had homered in 7 of 9 games, if I'm doing the math right. So they rode his hot bat, but they also rode the hot hand of the pitching staff. As you can see, 3 runs was the most runs they allowed to the Cubs, and the Cubs had a dominant offense. Actually, looking at the 5 NL teams who were in the playoffs, the Mets had the worst record among all 5 of them with the 90 wins. So it's understandable why nobody really thought they were going to get this far. And it just goes to show you that pitching really does matter. And when you have good pitching, you don't necessarily need the offense to carry you as long as you can get good production out of your arms. And this whole NLCS, that's how it was. Harvey was dominant. Syndergaard was dominant. Degrom was dominant. Even Colon was dominant himself. None of these guys won the distance in any of their games, but they logged 6 to 7 innings. I don't remember the exact innings pitched that they had, but these guys are just super consistent. They were riding the hot hand, and they were literally, it seemed like they were unhittable throughout this whole series. They made the Cubs kind of look foolish in this series. They didn't make the Dodgers look so much as foolish, but when the Cubs came in, it was like the Cubs had no answers. And I think looking at kind of how the Cubs were getting a lot of their runs, it seems like they were a little reliant on the long ball. You can see they got the home run from Schwarber in game 1. Schwarber and Soler game 3, Bryant game 4. So that's already more than half of your runs scored total. going via the long ball, and it doesn't work. And the Cubs learned that rather quickly. The Mets, they weren't necessarily riding the home run ball. They just kind of they were getting the long ball, but it wasn't something they were riding the whole way into the World Series. So it's just, I think really that's it seems like that's what it came down to, is the starting pitching was what really helped carry this team into the World Series. And a lot of people didn't realize how good of a starting pitching staff they had until they got here, and they swept the Cubs out of the water when nobody thought they would.
Yeah, I think that was probably the first year that people looked at the Cubs as not only a threat but probably a favorite in the National League. That was really like, their first year. Obviously, for Cubs fans, it's not quite so hard of a pill to swallow. If you remember what happened the very next season. So for Cubs fans, at least, that wasn't the end of the world. It probably felt like it at the time. Looking at the 2015 World Series matchup, the Mets ended up facing the Kansas City Royals, who did their scrappiest of scrappy jobs throughout basically all of October. They did it the season prior as well. The Royals pretty much prided themselves on pitching and bullpen work. They were the first team to really modernize the bullpen in general. With Wade Davis, Greg Holland, they had a super duper strong bullpen, and their rotation's job was get the ball to the bullpen. That's kind of where that whole trend started. Look, the games played out. It was very hard, very very closely contested, basically the whole way through, except for Game 2 and Game 3. Where even at points, the score was pretty close, and the game was much closer than the score made it out to be. Game 1 started off, I think people knew what kind of series we were going to get right from the bat. Game 1 went 14 innings, and Kansas City walked it off in a 5-4 finale. Chris Young, the big, tall righty, Chris Young, he got the win for the Royals in that game, with Bartolo taking the loss. Granderson homered for the Mets. Meanwhile, Escobar and Gordon each homered for the Royals. Game 2 was a Kansas City, I'll say blowout, because it was a six-run lead. But like I said, it was much closer than that. It felt like it, at least. That was Johnny Cueto taking the win and Degrom taking the loss in that one. Game 3, the Mets kind of got the revenge a little bit. 9-3 win for them there. Syndergaard got the win in that game, with the late Yordano Ventura taking the loss in that one. David Wright and Curtis Granderson each homered for the Mets in that game. Game 4 was Kansas City again, winning 5-3. The veteran relief pitcher Ryan Madsen, who was kind of having a comeback to his career at that point with the Royals, he nailed down the win in relief. Tyler Clippard took the loss in relief. Wade Davis nailed down the save, and Michael Conforto homered twice in that one. That would be his second and third of the postseason. And then in Game 5, the Kansas City won the series, 7-2 win. That was through 12 innings through that one. And Luke Hochevar took the win. Addison Reed took the loss. Granderson hit his third home run of the series. What I remembered most about that World Series was the fact that it was really just when is Kansas City going to take the lead? At what time is Kansas City going to come back, do some magic and jump in front? It felt like the Mets, like I looked at the Mets as the better team. At least, at that point in time, the Royals had very phenomenal players on their team. But at least through most of these games, the Mets had the lead early on almost every game. It was pretty much Mets from the get-go. And then, the 6th, the 7th, the Royals they'll scrap a run here, scrap a run there, station to station baseball and base running. And then, we're getting close. Now it's like a 2-1 game here in the bottom of the top of the 8th, and the Royals scratch across that tying run. As Joe Buck said, terrific base running by Hosmer ties it. That's a saying that stuck, or not a saying, but a call that stuck with me since that series. Yeah, like I said, it just felt like it felt like that series ran through Kansas City. It ran on Kansas City's time. And
Yeah.
felt like whenever it just wanted to turn it on, they did.
Yeah, and this was kind of, considering how good the Mets pitching staff had been. Sure, there were questions around the offense, and honestly, as important as pitching is, balance is really important as well. And if your offense just isn't really there at some point, the hot hand is going to cool off. And that's kind of what it felt like happened here in the World Series. The pitching just wasn't the same in the World Series, and I don't know if it was just some of these guys got nervous out there. Granted, you got youngsters like Degrom and Syndergaard. Maybe being on the big stage got to them a little bit. It's possible. But the Royals had also been there the year before, and it just kind of felt like Kansas City. This series did ride on the Royals. When are they gonna? They just played scrappy baseball, small ball. That helped get them over the hump eventually, and the Mets offense just didn't really show up. They had a big game 3, but other than that, 4 runs, 1 run, 3 runs, and 2 runs. That doesn't always win you games. You can get away with that in the regular season, but in the playoffs, that can start to be a bit of a taller mountain to climb up. And the pitching just kind of lost its heat. It seemed like Degrom had an uncharacteristically bad outing in Game 2. Cologne wasn't that sharp. Well, actually, Cologne came out of the bullpen in Game 1. I believe it was it Harvey that got the start in Game 1 for the Mets? I believe
it might have been.
I believe it was Harvey who got the start in Game 1. Yeah, it was Harvey that got the start in Game 1. He wasn't bad. Yeah, actually, Harvey was pretty good. It was just the bullpen didn't didn't really hold it down in Game 1. Game 3, Syndergaard came out fire blazing, and the Mets offense really did show up. But then Game 4, you could probably put some of that blame on Daniel Murphy, because he had that really that crucial error in the 8th inning.
Awful.
And against a team like the Royals, that can't happen. That was definitely a big blow there. And then Game 5, it was just the phenomenal base running by Eric Hosmer in the 9th inning that forced extra innings, and eventually the Royals just powered away. But this Mets team was a very overlooked team, in my opinion. They were someone that not a lot of people really saw being at this point. But when you look at how things just played out for them, it makes complete sense how they got here. They rode the hot hand of the pitching. They had consistent production from their offense. Occasionally their offense would put up some big nights, but for the most part, they just consistently would score enough runs to help their pitchers, because their pitching staff just didn't allow runs. That's just kind of how it came down. And it worked. It worked for them through the division series. It worked for them through the championship series. But coming into the World Series, they just ran into a team like the Royals, who kind of were in similar territory, where their pitchers just didn't allow runs, and they knew the offense wasn't stand out so much, but they had guys who could perform consistently, and they just played scrappy small ball to kind of help them get there after a while. I mean, you can even see in the box score, Escobar and Gordon were the only 2 guys who homered for the Royals. So they didn't need the long ball. They just need to put the ball in play. If they put the ball in play, it's a 50-50 chance for them that something good is going to happen, and something good happened for them. So, it was a good run for the Mets. I just think you got to have a little more balance. That was something that maybe they could have addressed that a little more with maybe not only adding Yoenis Cespedes. They could have maybe addressed the offense a little more. But why not? If your pitching is doing well enough, you can't really blame them for sticking with what they had, knowing that the pitching staff was going to help them.
Yeah, they were 3 runs away from a World Series, if you can go back and look, if you can find a guy that can get you 3 wins, that's all the more they needed. And I think what really makes this what makes this a true one-hit wonder is the fact that they immediately fell apart afterwards. And they've been pretty much, mired in inconsistency, mired in injuries, mired in, the 500 ball since then. So that was, looking back now, obviously they have at least a good outside chance to make a little bit of noise. I doubt anyone's going to unseat the Dodgers or the Padres, but if you look at it, that might have been their best shot at winning a World Series, at least for the time being.
Yeah. Well, they did make the wild card game in
They did make the
2016,
wild card in 2016,
but other than that, I mean, they haven't gotten past that,
yeah,
or they haven't even been remotely close. So
yeah, yep. And that's kind of what I was hinting at. As always, you can find us on social media. We appreciate you guys watching. You can find us on Instagram at Real Dugout Talk. You can find us on TikTok at Dugout Talk. You can find us on Twitter at Dugout Talk 1. You can find us on YouTube right here at Dugout Talk, and you can also find us on Facebook at Real Dugout Talk. And you can find me on PlayStation Network at Victory 1832. I'd love to play some games for you guys, and look forward to doing some more great content. Friday we have a good episode coming up.
yeah, it's gonna do like another history round. We did Chavez Ravine, or at least Cam did Chavez Ravine last Friday. We're gonna do the Negro Leagues this Friday. I think it'll be a fun little episode. There's a lot of history behind the Negro Leagues, so there should be a lot of content there, a lot of good learning in that way. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in with us again today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to share this with your friends and family. We love the support. But until then, we'll see you guys on Friday.
See you guys.